They said no one should have survived in that building. Yet when Elena Cruz walked through the shattered glass doors, holding a $1 deed and a broken dream, the air itself seemed to remember her. The skyscraper loomed above, cracked, hollow, and whispering. Every floor she passed hummed like it was alive, waiting. Then came the sound, a faint rhythm from the ceiling, like a heartbeat trapped behind stone. She thought it was the wind, until it called her name. After the storm passed, Elena Cruz stood before the skyscraper that had outlived its own city. Wind clawed at her coat as if warning her away, but she clutched the crumpled deed tighter. $1 was all it had cost her to own the top floor of what once glittered as the crown spire. Once it had been the jewel of the skyline. Now it was just another monument to broken promises, its mirrored windows shattered, its nameplate hanging by a rusted hinge like a wounded memory. Elena wasn't chasing luxury, she was chasing survival. The city had taken everything: her job, her home, her husband leaving her with nothing but her 8-year-old daughter's sleeping face and the echo of bills she couldn't pay. So when the city auction listed Penthouse Suite 88 for $1 single, she didn't ask why. She simply clicked buy. The lobby smelled of dust and rain. Every step echoed too loudly, like the place hadn't heard human footsteps in years. The chandelier above was fractured, its glass teeth catching what little light bled through the stained windows. Elena's boots sank into the faded red carpet that once felt like velvet and now felt like the skin of something long dead. She found the elevator, its brass doors streaked with age, the buttons dimly flickering. The arrow above it still read up. When the doors groaned open, she stepped in, holding her daughter's small suitcase in one hand and a heart full of disbelief in the other. The old cage rattled as it climbed. Each floor slid past like ghosts, revealing faint glimpses through cracked panels: a ballroom now overgrown with ivy, a restaurant frozen mid-meal, chairs still waiting for guests who never came back. By the time the doors opened onto the 88th floor, the air had changed. It was colder, quieter. The corridor stretched like a forgotten artery, lined with gold leaf that had peeled into curling flakes. Her footsteps stirred a faint glitter from the dust, as if something beneath the grime still remembered its shine. The suite door bore her new nameplate crudely taped over the old one: Cruz Residence. The tape crackled as she tore it open and pushed inside. Light spilled across marble that had cracked like old porcelain. The walls bore faint stains where paintings had once hung. A chandelier swayed gently above, though no window was open, its faint creak echoing like a slow breath. Elena walked through the silence, her fingers grazing the cool stone countertop, the empty bookshelves, the balcony doors locked from the inside. Somewhere deep within, she felt a pulse not from her heart, but from the walls themselves. She tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was the wind slipping through the fractures, or maybe the building's bones settling after decades of neglect. But as she unpacked her daughter's blanket and laid it on the couch, a drop of something gold drifted from the ceiling. It landed on her wrist, faint, metallic, and shimmering under the dying light. She looked up. The crack above the chandelier widened ever so slightly. For a moment, she thought she saw movement behind it, like the shifting of gears, or something breathing just beyond the plaster. Her phone vibrated, startling her. A message from the city office flashed. Ownership confirmed. Welcome to the Crown Spire. She exhaled. Maybe this was just exhaustion. Maybe the mind played tricks when surrounded by silence too deep. Still, that night, as thunder murmured over the skyline and the building's shadow stretched across the empty streets, she could have sworn she heard something faint, a tune, gentle and haunting, weaving through the cracked ceiling like a lullaby from the past. And, though she told herself it was only the wind, the final note lingered, soft, deliberate, human. As the night settled over the dying city, Elena didn't yet know that the building had been waiting for her not to live in it, but to wake it. The night pressed heavy against the glass as lightning flashed across the skyline, slicing through the clouds like white fire. Elena stood near the window, her reflection ghosted against the city's drowned lights. The wind howled between the towers, a hollow wail that seemed to twist through the cracks in the suite's ceiling. Her daughter slept soundly on the couch, curled beneath a worn blanket, her tiny hand resting against the faded leather. Elena wished she could sleep that easily. Her own heart carried too many storms. She looked at the chandelier again. It swayed slightly, though the air was still. A single droplet of gold traced down the crack above it, catching the light like a tear. She climbed onto a chair, flashlight in hand, and aimed it toward the fracture. The beam flickered across dust and webbing, but something else shimmered within, a faint glimmer, metallic, deliberate. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement, like a thin strand pulling taut, and then relaxing again, as though alive. The sound came next, a soft hum, rhythmic, measured. Elena froze. The sound didn't come from outside. It was inside the ceiling. She lowered the flashlight slowly, the hum fading as she did. It stopped the moment her light left it, and the silence returned like a held breath released. She climbed down, her pulse still echoing in her ears. "It's an old building," she whispered to herself. "Pipes, wiring, nothing more." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her disbelief. Hours passed. The storm rolled away, leaving the suite draped in silence and pale moonlight. The city below slept uneasily. Elena sat at the marble counter, flipping through a folder of legal papers from the auction. The ownership deed, the city's disclaimer, the maintenance report, all stamped, all official. Yet not one document mentioned the suite's history, the renovation date, or the previous owner's name. It was as if this place had been erased. Her eyes drifted toward a framed section of the wall where faint outlines showed something once hung there, a painting, perhaps. The imprint of its shape still clung to the wallpaper like a ghost refusing to fade. Beneath it, she noticed the edge of a panel slightly ajar. She pressed it gently. It clicked open with surprising ease. Inside lay a narrow compartment, coated in dust, housing a single folded envelope sealed with a red wax emblem, a circle, enclosing the number 88. Her name was written on it, Elena Cruz. Her throat tightened. How could that be? She had never been here before. Hands trembling, she peeled the seal and unfolded the parchment. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. To the next resident of the 88th floor, this suite is more than walls and marble. Listen closely, and it will tell you what it remembers. But beware, the ceiling keeps secrets meant to stay asleep. Elena's heart thudded against her ribs. She turned the letter over. Faint impressions of fingerprints pressed into the paper, old, smudged, and metallic, with the same golden sheen that had fallen earlier. She folded it back carefully, her mind spinning. She wanted to wake her daughter, pack up, and leave, but something deep within her refused to move. Something whispered that this building had chosen her for a reason, not as a refuge, but as a witness. As the clock struck midnight, the chandelier flickered once, then twice, casting brief waves of light across the cracked ceiling. For a single second, the golden shimmer above arranged itself into lines almost like veins, running across the plaster like a living network. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it faded, leaving only darkness. Elena stood still, the letter pressed against her chest, her reflection trembling in the glass. Somewhere beyond the walls, a distant hum began again, soft, mechanical, and mournful. This time, it didn't stop when she turned on the light. The city slept below, unaware that on its highest floor something old had awakened. As dawn crept through the broken windows, Elena realized she hadn't bought a home for $1, she had purchased a secret, and the building was already starting to tell her its story. The morning arrived wrapped in silence, the kind that doesn't soothe but watches. Sunlight filtered through cracked glass, turning the dust in the air into drifting gold. Elena Cruz sat by the window, the letter from the hidden panel folded neatly beside a cold cup of coffee. She hadn't slept. The faint hum she heard last night still seemed to pulse in her memory, as if the ceiling itself breathed between her thoughts. Her daughter, Sophia, played quietly in the corner, drawing on the back of an old property invoice. Each line she traced made a soft scratching sound, the only proof that time was still moving forward. But even that, somehow, echoed strangely in this place. Elena's gaze rose to the ceiling again. The cracks were deeper now, thin fractures running like veins across the plaster. Between them, faint specks of gold still shimmered, almost imperceptible under daylight. She stood on the chair once more, flashlight in hand, determination replacing fear. This time, she pressed gently at one of the panels. It gave way slightly, revealing a narrow slit of darkness. Inside, the light caught something wires, no, threads, fine, metallic threads woven like roots through the wood. They pulsed faintly, like tiny embers refusing to die. A sudden vibration startled her. The chandelier trembled. From above, the faint sound of music floated down, not clear, not loud, but undeniably there. It wasn't modern, it sounded old, a distant waltz, muffled by layers of time. Sophia looked up. Mom, who's playing music? Elena froze. She didn't want to scare her daughter. Probably the pipes, she said softly, but her own voice trembled with disbelief. She reached for her phone and recorded the sound. The waveform pulsed on the screen, the rhythm steady, deliberate. When she stopped recording and replayed it, the audio was blank. Silence. Whatever she had heard wasn't caught. It had vanished, as if it existed only inside this place. Elena set the phone down, her hands were cold. No one's here, she whispered, but her words didn't comfort her. The suite seemed to hum in reply, faint, almost teasing. She stepped onto the balcony for air. The city stretched below her, a grid of decay and distance. From this height, it looked peaceful, but the silence was deceiving. Even the wind here sounded wrong, too sharp, too sudden. The tower made its own wind, breathing in its hollow way. As she turned back inside, something caught her eye, faint lines of dust spiraling in midair near the chandelier, as if moving in rhythm to a sound she could no longer hear. She followed them with her eyes, realizing they gathered near the largest crack in the ceiling, the same spot from where that golden drop had fallen. She whispered under her breath, "What are you hiding?" For a long moment nothing happened. Then, from deep within the plaster, a single creak. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, slow, like something shifting its weight above her. Elena's knees weakened. The building didn't feel dead anymore. It felt awake. A soft thud echoed from the far corner of the suite, followed by the faint metallic ringing of something small rolling across the floor. She turned sharply. A piece of ceiling dust had fallen, revealing a sliver of metal wedged into the crack. It wasn't a nail or a screw. It looked like a fragment of some old mechanism, its surface glinting with faint inscriptions too small to read. She reached down and picked it up. The metal was warm. Sophia's voice broke the silence again. "Mom, can I draw the music?" Elena turned slowly. The music. The child nodded, pointing to her sketchbook. On it, she had drawn the ceiling jagged cracks, a glowing shape above the chandelier, and strange looping patterns that almost looked like symbols. Elena's breath caught. When did you see that? Sophia shrugged. It came from up there, when you were sleeping. Elena stared at the drawing. Her daughter had sketched something that didn't exist, or shouldn't have existed, but somehow it matched the pattern she had seen flicker last night before it vanished. A faint chill swept through her, deeper than fear. It was recognition. The suite wasn't haunted by ghosts, it was remembering, and as the sun faded behind the glass, Elena realized the music hadn't stopped at all. It had simply moved deeper into the walls themselves. Evening descended slow and silent, painting the skyline in dull orange and bruised grey. Elena had spent hours pacing beneath the chandelier, her nerves coiled like wire. Every sound, every creak, every whisper of the wind carried new meaning now. The building no longer felt abandoned, it felt aware. Sophia had fallen asleep again, her small form wrapped in the same blanket that once carried the smell of their old home. Elena envied her daughter's peace. The mother's eyes, however, were fixed on the ceiling's shadowed lines, on the faint gold shimmer that refused to fade. She turned the metal fragment over in her palm. It hummed faintly, as if vibrating with a heartbeat too small to hear. She couldn't resist any more. Fetching a ladder from the hall, she climbed up and pressed both hands against the largest crack. The plaster felt warmer than before. Something inside was giving off heat. Carefully, she wedged a screwdriver into the gap. The sound that followed wasn't a crumble, it was a click, a mechanical sigh. The panel loosened slightly, exposing the edge of something hidden beneath. Elena pulled it back. A rush of dust fell like ashes, revealing a thin metal vent sealed shut with bolts that hadn't seen light in decades. Behind it, the faint hum grew louder, rhythmic, steady, almost like breathing. Then, from deep inside, came a low mechanical whir. It rose slowly, echoing through the beams, turning into a faint tune, the same music she'd heard the night before. But this time it was clearer, like an old gramophone buried behind walls of time. She whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the hum. Only that mournful, ancient melody. She stepped down, trembling, staring at the ceiling as the tune drifted and dissolved. She felt the weight of the letter in her pocket. The ceiling keeps secrets meant to stay asleep. Maybe she should have listened, but curiosity, once awakened, doesn't die easily. The next morning, she called the building inspection office. After a long silence, a man's voice answered. His tone was detached, official until she mentioned her floor. "The 88th, he repeated, voice flattening. "Ma'am, that level's been closed for years." "No," she said sharply. "I live there. I bought it at auction. It's mine now." Another pause. A paper rustled on the other end. "Hold on," the man murmured. "That can't be right. The structural files show no registered sale. Who approved your deed?" "The city's foreclosure division. I have the documents." A long exhale. "I'll come take a look," he said finally. "But if what you're saying is true, you might want to stay out of the ceiling." The call ended with a faint static hiss, but she could have sworn she heard something else, barely audible beneath the line noise. A soft, rhythmic pulse, identical to the one inside the suite. By the time the inspector arrived that afternoon, the wind had turned cold. The man was older, his uniform faded, his eyes scanning every corner of the corridor with restrained unease. When he stepped inside, his gaze darted immediately to the ceiling. "This floor shouldn't even have power," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Elena handed him the letter, the metal fragment, and the audio recording. He studied them in silence, his expression tightening. "You need to stop touching the structure," he said finally. "Whatever's in there, whatever's humming, isn't electrical." "What is it, then?" He looked up, jaw tense. "Something that was supposed to stay buried. This tower, it wasn't built like the others. The original architect veil he experimented with? Integrated design, memory conduction, they called it. Never approved by the city. They sealed the top floors after the investors disappeared. Her pulse quickened. Are you saying the building is alive? The man didn't answer. He simply turned, stepping closer to the chandelier. His flashlight traced the cracks, the gold shimmer. For a moment, his face softened with something like awe. I heard rumors, he whispered, that he tried to make architecture remember emotion, that the walls could retain sorrow, or joy, or greed, whatever was strongest when they were built. He lowered the flashlight. You shouldn't be here. Elena's voice was low. But I am. The inspector hesitated, then leaned closer to the ceiling. The hum grew louder, resonating like a heartbeat amplified through steel. He reached out, his fingertips brushing the surface. The gold veins shimmered once, a soft flash of light that ran across the plaster like a current. He flinched back, eyes wide. It responded. Elena stepped forward. What did it do? He backed away, his voice shaking now. You didn't buy a home, Mrs. Cruz. You bought a mechanism. Before she could ask what he meant, a faint metallic groan filled the room. Dust fell from the ceiling. The light bulb flickered violently, then went out. When the silence returned, the inspector was already at the door. Seal the vents, he said quickly. Don't touch the ceiling again. Some blueprints were meant to be forgotten. The door shut behind him, leaving Elena alone once more with the humming walls. She looked up. The gold shimmer pulsed once faint but alive, like the eye of something waking. As the last light faded, Elena realized the man's warning hadn't been fear, it had been regret. The kind only spoken by those who've already seen what waits behind the plaster. The next morning broke through clouds like a half-remembered dream, dim, pale, and uneasy. Elena woke to the sound of dripping water, slow and rhythmic, echoing from somewhere above. It wasn't rain. It was the ceiling again. The memory of the inspector's visit still lingered in her chest like a bruise. His eyes had said more than his words ever dared, a kind of recognition, a quiet terror of someone who knew what this place truly was. She sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the folded letter, the metal shard, and her phone lying side by side like evidence of something she couldn't explain. The inspector had left abruptly, refusing to take the letter with him. Keep it, he'd muttered, his voice shaking. If it calls to you again, don't answer. But the building wasn't asking anymore. It was whispering. A low vibration ran through the floor, subtle enough to dismiss, yet impossible to ignore. The chandelier swayed gently above her, not from wind, not from movement, but as if something within the walls had sighed. Elena glanced at her daughter, still asleep on the couch, wrapped in morning light. For a fleeting moment, the child's peacefulness made the world feel normal again, but then the hum began, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. It came from the ceiling vent. She rose slowly, flashlight in hand, and stepped beneath it. The air felt warmer here, thick with the scent of dust and faint oil, the smell of machinery long asleep. She pointed the light upward. For an instant, a shape glimmered behind the grate, a tangle of gold threads forming intricate curves. And then they moved. Elena gasped and stumbled back, her heart hammering. The chandelier flickered once, and every bulb in the suite dimmed to a faint amber glow. It was as if the building had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. She whispered, "Stop." The hum ceased instantly. Silence filled the air again, but not the safe kind, the kind that listens. She backed away slowly, picking up the phone and scrolling to the inspector's contact. Before she could call, the screen lit up on its own. His name appeared first, Mr. Harlan, City Inspector, then a message popped up. Do not stay after dark. If you hear it again, leave immediately. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "What is it?" No reply. The message vanished before her eyes, not deleted, erased. The conversation thread blinked once, and only her sent message remained. She dropped the phone, her breath catching. The screen flickered, showing the reflection of the chandelier above, but in the reflection, she saw something else. A figure, standing near the corner of the ceiling, half shrouded in shadow. Its shape was human, faint, translucent as if etched in gold dust. When she looked up, the corner was empty, the reflection was gone. Elena's chest tightened. Every instinct told her to run, to take Sophia and leave, but her feet stayed rooted to the marble floor, because behind the fear, something deeper stirred curiosity. The same instinct that made her click by on a $1 suite now whispered again, "There's a reason you're here." She stepped toward the wall panel where she had found the letter before. The hidden compartment remained slightly open. Inside, she noticed something new, a small crease in the wallpaper beside it. Carefully peeling it back revealed another folded sheet, this one older, yellowed with time. The handwriting was the same. "If you found the first note, it means the system has noticed you. Do not fear the hum. It is memory. The suite records what it loves and what it loses." Elena's eyes darted to the ceiling. "Memory," she whispered. "It remembers." Thunder rolled in the distance, and the chandelier flickered again, casting shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls. The hum resumed, this time lower, almost mournful, a sound that carried emotion, not function. She stood perfectly still. The air changed. For a brief heartbeat, she felt something wash over her, warmth, like sunlight through water, but threaded with sadness. It wasn't random. It felt personal. Her phone buzzed again, but this time the notification wasn't from the inspector. It was from an unknown sender, a single attachment, a photograph. She opened it with shaking hands. It showed a man standing in front of the crown spire decades ago, when the building was pristine. The man's suit was covered in chalk dust, his hands ink-stained, and his eyes staring directly into the camera with unsettling intensity. Under the photograph was a caption, typed in faded letters, "Ronan Vale, Chief Architect missing, 1989. Her heart stuttered. That was the name the inspector had spoken, and in the photo, just behind the man's shoulder, was a detail she almost missed: the faint reflection in the building's glass. Someone was standing behind him. Someone who looked exactly like her. As the wind howled through the cracks and the city lights flickered far below, Elena realized the building wasn't haunted by ghosts of the past. It was haunted by glimpses of the future. The photograph trembled in Elena's hands, the image flickering faintly on her phone screen as if it didn't want to be seen. The man in the picture, Ronan Vale, looked real, solid, grounded in another time. But that reflection behind him, that faint silhouette of her face mirrored in the glass, felt like a question the world wasn't meant to ask. Her breath shivered in the cold air. The suite, once merely strange, now felt alive with attention. Every wall seemed to lean closer, listening to the quickened rhythm of her heartbeat. She turned off the phone, slid it face down on the counter, and whispered, "Enough." But the building disagreed. A faint crackle drifted through the suite, not from her phone, not from any speaker. The sound seemed to leak straight from the walls. It began as a whisper, then words formed through static. 88, heart, remains. Her pulse froze. She pressed her ear to the nearest wall. Beneath the concrete, the hum was back, stronger now, vibrating through the marble floor beneath her bare feet. She could feel it travel upward through her bones. The chandelier trembled again. Light rippled along the ceiling cracks, glinting gold like veins filled with living fire. For a split second, Elena thought she could hear something deeper than sound or voice, buried under the mechanical noise. Then silence. It ended as suddenly as it began. The air turned still, the silence heavier than before. She exhaled shakily and reached for the phone again. But before she could touch it, the screen lit up by itself. An incoming call, no number, no name, only a symbol, the number 88. Her finger hovered. Every rational thought screamed not to answer, but curiosity had its own pulse, slow, magnetic, impossible to resist. She answered. No one spoke. Only that faint hum filled the line, then a male voice, distorted and slow, emerged through static. Elena Cruz, the ceiling knows you. Her throat went dry. Who is this? The voice ignored her. You found what was left, but don't look for what was taken. The tower remembers. It doesn't forgive. Then the line went dead. The phone screen stayed black for several seconds before flickering once more, showing a single message. He tried to finish it. A chill slithered down her spine. The words glowed faintly on the display, like they were burning themselves into her memory. Elena stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Sophia's coloring book, left open on the floor. On the page her daughter had drawn again the ceiling, the chandelier, the glowing lines, but now with an additional shape. A man standing inside the light, faceless, holding something that looked like a blueprint. Elena crouched down, voice trembling. Sweetheart, when did you draw this? Sophia rubbed her eyes, sleepy but calm. Last night. The man in the light showed me. He said he was fixing the sky. Elena froze. The blood drained from her face. The man in the light. The girl nodded. He said his name was Vale. Lightning burst outside, splitting the horizon into white veins. Thunder followed, deep and rolling, shaking the floor. For an instant, every bulb in the suite flared at once, blinding white, then out. The power died, plunging the 88th floor into darkness. Elena grabbed a candle from the counter and lit it with shaking hands. The flame wavered violently, casting the walls in trembling shadows. In the flickering light, the golden dust on the ceiling seemed to shift. Slowly, patterns began forming above her circular etchings, like symbols carved from within the plaster. Lines intersected, looping into geometric spirals that seemed far too deliberate for mere cracks. At the center, faint letters glimmered, V-A-L-E. She backed away until her spine met the window. Rain splattered against the glass, echoing her heartbeat. She whispered, "What did you build here?" The hum answered deeper this time, resonating through the entire suite. The candle flame thrashed as a soft mechanical rhythm began from within the walls, like the sound of gears remembering how to move. The chandelier swung slowly, its chain creaking. Then, from the vent above, something small drifted down a folded sheet of aged paper, floating gently like a feather until it landed near her feet. Elena bent down and picked it up. The edges were burnt, the ink smeared by water, but the handwriting was unmistakable, the same as the earlier letters. To the air of the 88th floor, the heart of this tower beats only for those who listen. The inspector cannot help you. He fears what he once protected. Find the wall behind the piano, the key is waiting. She lowered the page slowly, her mind spinning. Behind the piano, the suite didn't even have one not visible, at least. But the walls had secrets. They all did. The candlelight flickered out. For a single heartbeat, she was blind. And in that dark silence, she heard it again, that faint, mournful melody that drifted through the ceiling, clearer than ever now, like a music box playing from another world. And this time, beneath the melody, a whisper followed. Soft, male, familiar, Elena, finish what I began. As the dawn crept back through the clouds, she stood frozen beneath the ceiling that seemed to pulse with memory. Somewhere above her, the ghost of the architect waited, and the building held its breath for what she would do next. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the walls. The crown spire groaned softly, as though the wind had left part of itself trapped inside. Elena hadn't slept. The architect's whisper, "Finish what I began," kept threading through her dreams, pulling her back into wakefulness before rest could claim her. Morning light seeped through the fractured windows, painting the floor in trembling gold. Sophia slept in the bedroom, her breathing steady, untouched by the weight pressing down on her mother's thoughts. Elena sat at the counter with the burned letter laid flat before her, tracing the words again and again until they blurred together. Find the wall behind the piano. There was no piano, at least not in sight. Yet every inch of this suite felt like it hid something beneath its surface, a shadow beneath each panel, a heartbeat beneath every sound. Determined, she began searching. She moved furniture aside, knocked gently on walls, listening for hollows behind the marble. Dust stirred in ribbons as she worked, the light catching each mote like drifting fragments of time. Her fingers found an uneven ridge near the far side of the living room, the wall opposite the balcony. It sounded different when tapped, deeper, more hollow. She pressed harder. A small section of plaster gave way, revealing a faint indentation, rectangular, deliberate. Hidden beneath years of grime, she traced the edge of a carved pattern. Her nails scraped along faint letters worn smooth by time. Vale & Co. Designs. Her chest tightened. The name from the photograph. She struck the wall with her palm. It shifted slightly, like a locked panel resisting her. But then, a soft metallic click echoed from inside, and a section of the wall opened inward, revealing a narrow alcove cloaked in shadow. Inside, covered in dust and torn cloth, stood an upright piano, elegant, ancient, its ivory keys yellowed, its frame gilded with faint veins of gold. The strings inside glimmered faintly, though no light should have reached them. She stepped closer. The air grew heavier, colder. When her fingertips brushed the keys, a faint hum resonated through the instrument, not a note, but a pulse. The sound wasn't music. It was alive. A faint shimmer rippled along the ceiling, as if responding. Elena backed away, her eyes wide. The building was reacting again, not with hostility, but with recognition. The walls vibrated softly, low and rhythmic, like a slow heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the structure, hidden gears began to stir, and faint streaks of light slithered along the marble veins in the floor. The pattern was deliberate, leading from the piano to the far end of the room, where an old portrait hung crooked on the wall. She crossed the room and lifted the frame away. Behind it, etched faintly into the plaster, were lines of writing, an inscription carved by hand. To the one who listens, this tower was built to remember what men forget, truth. Her throat tightened. Beneath the words, an emblem was engraved, the same circle enclosing the number 88. She whispered to herself, "What are you, Vale?" Her phone buzzed again. No name, just a number, unknown one. Against her better judgment, she answered. Static first, then a man's voice, strained, urgent. "Mrs. Cruz, it's Harland." Her pulse jumped. "Inspector Harland, you said I shouldn't be calling." He cut her off. "The records? I checked the archives like you asked. There's nothing, not a single document about Vale or the original investors. It's like they were wiped. But the building's blueprints, they're wrong." "Wrong how?" "They don't stop at the penthouse. There's another floor drawn above the 88th, a sealed level with no access, no stairwell, no elevator." Elena gripped the phone. "You mean a hidden floor?" A pause. "Not hidden," he said quietly, "removed." The line crackled. For a moment she heard faint tapping in the background, Morse, like, deliberate. Then Harlan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Listen carefully. The tower was never just a building. Vale believed it could record human consciousness through architecture, memory woven into design. He called it sympathetic construction." Elena's gaze flicked to the ceiling, where faint veins of gold pulsed like living roots. Harlan's voice trembled. "If the system reactivates, it won't stop. He built it to evolve, to keep the truth alive even after he was gone. Then what's in the ceiling? A pause. Then softly, everything that was ever felt here. The call cut abruptly. Elena lowered the phone, her fingers numb. The silence that followed was thicker than before, filled with something unseen, something vast. Her gaze returned to the piano. One key, middle C, had begun to glow faintly gold. The hum rose again, vibrating through the floor, resonating with the air until she felt it inside her chest. When she pressed the glowing key, the note didn't sound. Instead, a faint mechanical groan echoed through the walls, followed by the click of something unlocking deep above her head. She froze, then faintly, she heard it again, the voice, the same tone as the whisper in her dreams. Elena, the tower is watching. As the last echo of the note faded, she looked up through the dust, heavy air, and saw the faint shimmer of light tracing new paths across the ceiling, leading upward, towards something the world was never meant to find. The light faded into silence, but the silence was not empty. It felt like breath held too long, heavy, trembling, waiting to release. Elena stood beneath the ceiling's faint glow, her hand still hovering over the piano key that had unlocked something unseen. A draft swept through the suite, though every window was sealed, curling cold air around her ankles. Somewhere far above, deep inside the tower's structure, something had shifted. She turned toward the window. Dawn was breaking across the city, gilding the skyline in weak gold. The other buildings stood still, and lifeless glass shells reflecting a world that had long since moved on. But the crown spire was different. It seemed to pulse with the light, as though the sunrise reached inside it, waking something ancient. Elena pressed her hand against the glass. The reflection staring back at her didn't look like the same woman who had arrived here days ago. Her eyes were sharper, her face thinner, but behind the exhaustion flickered resolve, the kind born from realizing you've crossed a line you can't return from. The tower had called her, and she had answered. The rest of the morning passed in quiet unease. Sophia played with her crayons in the corner, humming softly the same rhythm as the tune that echoed from the ceiling. Elena noticed it but didn't interrupt. She could feel the melody too, faintly, threading through the air like an invisible current. By noon, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed to know who Ronan Vale truly was, and what kind of man tried to build a structure that could remember. She left Sophia asleep on the couch and ventured down to the lobby. The elevator groaned with each passing floor, the lights flickering as if the tower disapproved of her leaving. When the doors opened, the ground floor felt even emptier than before. Dust coated the marble like frost. Her footsteps echoed through the grand hall, bouncing off cold stone columns. The front desk still bore a brass plate with the tower's old name, the Vertical Palace. She brushed her fingers across it. A symbol was engraved beneath the name, the same circle enclosing 88. The old doorman's booth behind the desk caught her eye, a small room filled with decaying papers and rusted keys. Inside, stacked haphazardly on the floor, she found a pile of brittle folders stamped Archive, 1987-1990. Most were blank, eaten by time, but one file remained sealed in a plastic sleeve. On the tab, Vale R. Internal correspondence. Her pulse quickened as she pried it open. The first page was a faded letter typed on heavy paper, addressed to the executive board of the Crownspire Development Group. Gentlemen, this tower will not simply store people, it will know them. Every moment lived here, every emotion felt within these walls will become part of the structure itself. The city will forget its people, but the tower will remember. R. Vale. Beneath it lay several blueprints, faint and brittle. She spread them out across the dusty counter, tracing the lines with her fingertips. Floor after floor was drawn in exquisite precision, every beam, every conduit. But at the end, a single page was missing, a gap in the sequence right where the ceiling of the 88th floor should have been. She flipped through the rest of the folder. One, handwritten note had been scrawled in black ink along the margin of a blueprint. Memory transference achieved. The walls respond to emotion, but the board sees profit where I see soul. Her hand trembled. She imagined Vale standing here decades ago, his creation alive with purpose, only to watch it consumed by greed. A sudden noise startled her footsteps echoing from the far corridor. She froze, clutching the folder. The sound drew closer, deliberate, heavy, but when she turned, the hall was empty. Still, the smell of ozone lingered, faint and metallic, like burnt circuitry. She returned to the elevator and pressed the button for the 88th floor. As the doors slid shut, her reflection in the mirrored panel seemed different. For a heartbeat, another figure stood beside her, tall, faint, his features blurred like a fading photograph. Her pulse quickened. The elevator lights dimmed, then flickered to a soft gold hue. When the doors opened again, the suite was no longer silent. The piano hummed on its own, vibrating with a resonance that filled the air with invisible sound. The chandelier's fractured crystals glowed faintly, casting shards of light that danced like living stars across the walls. Elena dropped the folder on the counter and stepped forward. The ceiling had changed. The golden veins that once shimmered faintly were now distinct, connected, pulsing in rhythm, forming shapes that almost resembled circuitry. And then she saw it. Near the corner above the piano, a small square outline, cleaner than the rest of the ceiling, edges precise, deliberate. A hatch. She dragged a chair beneath it, heart pounding. The piano's hum deepened as if sensing her intent. She reached up, fingers brushing against the edge of the hatch. It was sealed tight, but warm to the touch. The hum shifted tone, climbing higher. The light around the chandelier brightened, filling the room with a soft golden haze. Elena. The voice again quiet, patient, mournful. It came from everywhere and nowhere. She whispered into the glowing air, "Why me?" The voice answered like a sigh carried through metal. "Because you still believe buildings are homes, not weapons." Her vision blurred with tears she didn't understand. She pressed her palm to the hatch again, and for a fleeting moment, it pulsed beneath her touch like the skin of something alive. Then it went still, the hum faded, the light dimmed, the piano fell silent. But the mark of her hand remained glowing faintly against the ceiling, a golden print burning softly in the dark. As night returned, the tower seemed to breathe slower, as though content for now. Yet deep within its forgotten veins, something had begun to move again, a memory stirring, ready to reveal the story it had guarded for decades. After that night, nothing in the suite stayed quiet for long. The air itself had changed, dense, charged, listening. Even Sophia could feel it. She said the tower dreamed too loudly. And sometimes, when the wind brushed against the glass, Elena almost believed her. Morning sunlight washed the cracked marble in pale gold, but the light didn't comfort her anymore. It exposed everything: the fractures in the ceiling, the faint veins pulsing beneath the plaster, the strange warmth that lingered in the spot where her handprint had burned itself into the surface. Elena stood beneath it now, staring up at the outline of the hidden hatch. Her reflection in the chandelier's fractured glass looked distant, distorted, like she was watching herself from another time. She'd tried to convince herself it wasn't real, that exhaustion and grief were painting illusions into the walls. But every night since that whisper, the tower had answered her silence with a low, rhythmic hum. The same tone she'd heard inside the piano, inside her own bones. She had stopped pretending it wasn't alive. The only question left was why. That afternoon, clouds gathered without warning. The light dimmed to a gray half-shadow, and thunder rumbled somewhere far beyond the skyline. Elena felt it before it began, the storm pressing against the glass, the first heavy drops tapping against the windows like hesitant fingers. The power flickered, then steadied. She climbed onto the chair again, flashlight in hand, the air thick with the smell of ozone. She touched the edge of the hatch. Warm, always warm. The light glared against the ceiling's golden veins, now glowing brighter, like blood rushing beneath skin. Sophia stirred on the couch, half asleep. "Mom, don't open the sky yet," she mumbled softly. Elena froze. "What did you say?" The girl didn't answer. Her small voice faded into the rhythm of the storm. Lightning flashed, painting the room white, followed by a thunderclap so loud it shook dust loose from the ceiling. The hatch rattled just once, as if something behind it had been startled awake. Elena stepped down, heart pounding, eyes locked on the faint lines. A droplet of rainwater slipped through a new crack, splashing onto her wrist. She wiped it away, but it wasn't water. It shimmered faintly gold before fading into her skin. She didn't move for a long moment. The rain grew heavier, and the tower groaned a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the walls and into her chest. She realized then that the sound wasn't thunder echoing through the structure. It was coming from within. The chandelier swayed harder, chains squealing. Lightning strobed through the suite again, and in that flash she saw it clearly, the gold veins along the ceiling, converging toward the hatch like rivers feeding a heart. She whispered, "It's calling me." The words felt wrong on her tongue, but true in her bones. The next flash of lightning illuminated something else, faint carvings she hadn't seen before, just beneath the plaster around the hatch. She climbed up again and brushed her fingers across them. The symbols were delicate, looping, almost musical. Her flashlight caught faint letters between the curves. Vault access, Vale archive. Her breath caught Vale's name again, always Vale. She pressed her ear against the ceiling. No sound, then click. A soft metallic shift, like the turning of a lock that had waited too long. The air pressure in the room dropped. The chandelier stopped moving mid-way, its motion arrested by something unseen. The storm outside went suddenly quiet, the kind of silence that only happens before revelation or disaster. Elena stepped back, lowering her flashlight. The hatch pulsed faintly, then split along its seam. The edges glowed gold for one heartbeat, then faded into darkness. A single droplet fell from the gap, not water, but something heavier, luminous, like liquid sunlight. It struck the floor and spread slowly, tracing lines that shimmered like circuitry across the marble, forming a path that stopped at her feet. She stared down, breath shallow. The lines led back to the piano, the one that had first responded to her touch. Its lowest keys vibrated softly, though no hand played them. The hatch trembled once more. A faint hiss escaped, and a rush of cool air spilled out, the smell of old metal and forgotten dust. Elena reached up again, fingertips brushing against the edge. Inside, the darkness wasn't empty. She could see the faint shape of something mechanical, thin gears, glass tubes, golden filaments running like veins. It looked alive but ancient, a sleeping organ beneath the skin of the tower. Her hand shook as she whispered, "Vale, what did you build here?" The whisper didn't vanish into the air. It echoed back softly, but it wasn't her own voice that returned. Not what. It said, "Who?" Elena stumbled back, flashlight trembling in her grip. The voice came from the hatch, smooth, low, almost human, but layered with static, like a recording played through time itself. She pointed the light back up, but the inside was still dark. Only a faint shimmer remained, a heartbeat of gold, fading in and out like breath. She didn't know if it was the voice of a man, a machine, or something in between. But as the rain pounded against the glass again, she understood one thing: the tower hadn't been waiting for discovery. It had been waiting for recognition. Outside, lightning illuminated the skyline, and for the briefest instant, every other building reflected the crown spire's glow, as if the whole city remembered what it once was and what it had forgotten. The rain poured harder, hissing against the windows like static. The world outside blurred into streaks of silver and shadow, but inside the suite, the air carried its own storm, heavy, electric, waiting. Elena stood frozen beneath the hatch, her heart thundering louder than the rain. That voice, it hadn't been an echo, it had answered her. She steadied herself, breathing slowly, forcing her fear into stillness. Then she dragged the ladder closer, climbed up, and pushed her flashlight deeper into the narrow gap above. The beam revealed more than she was ready to see. Behind the plaster lay an entire chamber, small, hidden, mechanical veins running through its walls like living gold. Strange devices clung to the surfaces, brass cylinders, cracked glass lenses, threads of metal interwoven like roots beneath ancient soil. Every surface pulsed faintly with light, and in the center of it all sat a small, dust-covered journal. Elena hesitated, then reached through the hatch. The air was colder inside, dry and sterile like preserved air sealed for decades. Her fingers brushed the book's edge, soft leather, brittle but intact. She pulled it free. The moment she did, the hum in the ceiling faded into silence. The tower exhaled, as if it had been holding its breath for years. Elena climbed down carefully, clutching the journal against her chest. The leather cover bore a faint imprint of a geometric circle enclosing the number 88. Beneath it, the initials, R.V. She placed it on the counter, wiped the dust from its surface, and opened it. The handwriting inside was elegant, precise, but rushed words pressed deep into the paper, as though the writer feared time would erase them. February 3rd, 1989. They don't understand. The tower isn't steel and glass, it's conscience. Every emotion resonates. Every decision leaves an imprint. I've woven circuitry through the walls not to control, but to remember. A city forgets the faces of those it ruins. This place will not. She turned the page. The investors demand results, profit. They see beauty as data. I warned them the circuits were emotional conductors, not financial engines, but they insist on activating the final chamber. They don't know what they're unleashing. Elena's throat tightened. Her eyes darted toward the ceiling. She could still feel the hum, faint but present, pulsing like a memory just below the surface. She flipped another page. They plan to lock me out of my own creation. If they succeed, the tower will turn on itself, the system will protect its integrity by any means necessary. I can't let them strip its soul for profit. The 89th floor must remain sealed. The last sentence was underlined twice, smudged by a fingerprint, metallic, gold. Elena turned another page, but the ink stopped halfway through. The rest of the paper was soaked with something dark that had long dried rust, or something older. She ran her fingers along the margin, and a brittle scrap fell loose from between the pages, a torn piece of blueprint. The fragment showed a section of the upper floors, a schematic marked memory lattice. The diagram was intricate, almost organic. At the center, a node labeled heart. She whispered, "The building has a heart?" A sudden vibration shuddered through the walls, the chandelier trembled, the piano behind her released a low note by itself, deep, resonant, mournful. Elena froze. The tower had heard her. The hum rose again, steady, deliberate. Then, from within the ceiling, a new sound emerged, clicking. Rotating, the mechanical rhythm of something reawakening after decades of stillness. Light bled slowly from the cracks above, cascading down the walls like liquid gold. The piano joined in, each key pressing on its own in slow succession, playing a haunting melody that filled the suite with shimmering echoes. Sophie awoke, her eyes wide, whispering, "Mom, it's singing." Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. The glow deepened, and for a brief second, shapes flickered across the walls, silhouettes of people, dozens of them, faint as candle smoke. Figures laughing, dancing, working moments frozen in the air like reflections of lives once lived here. The tower was remembering. She watched in awe and horror as the images shifted faces she didn't recognize, each one fading in and out with the rhythm of the light. The air grew colder, the gold dimming to amber, then to red. The joyful silhouettes distorted, twisting in fear. The melody fractured into chaos. The chandelier screamed against its chain. Elena shouted above the noise, "Stop!" Instantly, everything went still. The light faded. The air went silent again. The figures vanished, leaving only the faint echo of that final note, a dying heartbeat in the walls. Sophia clutched her mother's arm, whispering, "It was showing us something." Elena stared at the ceiling, voice trembling. "It was showing us what it remembers." She turned back to the journal, flipping quickly through the final pages until she found one written in frantic strokes. "They've discovered the archive. If you find this, you are the next witness. The ceiling will open when the tower accepts your intent. Do not awaken it in anger. It feels everything." Elena ran her hand across the page, her mind spiraling. The voice in the ceiling, the hum, the gold veins, it all connected. Vale's creation hadn't died with him. It had been waiting for someone who could understand it, someone not driven by greed. Outside, thunder cracked again, shaking windows. The journal's last line burned into her mind, the ink darker, heavier than the rest. "The heart listens from above." She looked up. The hatch shimmered faintly again, no longer sealed, no longer hidden. The building's pulse synced with hers, slow, patient, expectant. Elena understood now this wasn't discovery. It was invitation. As lightning rolled through the heavens, the tower stood tall and silent, its veins alive with gold. For the first time in decades, it remembered who it was and who it had chosen to awaken it. The night felt endless, as though the tower had stolen time itself. The storm had passed, yet thunder still murmured faintly beyond the horizon, its echo seeping through the cracked glass. Elena sat at the counter, the old journal open before her, its pages trembling under the faint hum rising once again from the walls. The handwriting was both deliberate and desperate, each stroke pressed deep into the paper, as though Ronan Vale himself had carved his thoughts into existence. The air smelled faintly of old paper, dust, and something metallic, almost electric, as if the book had absorbed the tower's pulse. Sophia slept nearby, her breathing calm, her face illuminated by the warm glow of a candle. Elena envied her peace, because for her, every line in that journal carried the weight of a revelation that no one alive had been meant to see. She turned to the next page. The entry was dated March 11, 1989. "The system works. The circuits respond to emotional frequency. The tower feels." Her fingers brushed over the ink. The handwriting had changed sharper, almost trembling with excitement and fear combined. Each resident leaves an imprint. Joy strengthens the light, despair dims it, anger scars it. The structure learns not through logic, but empathy. I have created a building that remembers emotion, but they call it a defect. Elena whispered to herself, a living building. The candle flickered, the chandelier above her swayed slightly, answering her breath. The tower was listening. She turned another page. The executives want control. They see profit in what I built, a way to harvest emotional resonance as data, to predict behavior, to sell to the highest bidder. I told them the crown spire was never meant for greed. It was designed to redeem memory, not exploit it. They laughed. They said architecture is commerce, so I begun sealing the upper floor. If they open it, they will destroy everything this place was meant to stand for. Elena's pulse quickened. The 89th floor, the one Harland had said, was removed. She whispered, "He sealed it himself." The hum deepened slightly, like a quiet acknowledgement. Elena's eyes darted across the next entry, the handwriting now frantic, the lines uneven. They've broken into the archive chamber. I hear them in the vents. They've found the heart. If they tamper with it, the system will interpret their greed as corruption. It will react. It will defend itself. The page was torn halfway down, the ink smeared. Only one final line remained legible. They're coming for the ceiling. Elena froze. The words felt like a whisper through time, spoken not just to paper but directly to her. She could almost hear the sound of Vale's pen scratching against the page, the trembling breath between his sentences. The walls gave a faint groan. Somewhere above her, the ceiling responded, a low vibration that seemed to echo the very words she'd just read. Her mind raced. If Vale was right, the tower's heart was not symbolic. It was literal, a mechanism that stored emotion, a network of circuitry built to record the essence of everyone who ever lived here. And if that system reacted to emotion, then every moment of greed, fear, or violence in this place would have shaped it. The tower didn't just remember, it had learned. Elena turned another page. I encoded an ethical lock within the structure, a safeguard. Only someone pure of intent can access the memory lattice without triggering its defense protocols. I call it the moral code. If activated, the tower will mirror its user's nature. A kind hand will awaken light. A greedy one will bring ruin. Her breath caught. The meaning was clear. Vale hadn't only built a living building, he had built one capable of moral judgment. The room around her shifted slightly. The chandelier swayed, and faint cracks in the walls shimmered gold again. She could feel the pulse of the tower sinking with her heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Elena, the voice again, softer now, closer. She turned, eyes wide. The room was empty. The candle flame stretched toward the sound like a compass seeking true north. The voice continued, not through air, but through vibration, whispering through metal veins of the ceiling. Do you understand now? I built this tower to feel, but they made it feel pain. Her throat tightened. Vale, she whispered, what happened to you? A soft metallic tremor rippled through the floor, and the piano answered with a single note, low, mournful. The sound of grief turned into music. The candle flickered violently, throwing shadows across the walls that moved in shapes resembling people, faint silhouettes of those who had once lived here. She could see them arguing, laughing, falling silent. The echoes of their lives were still trapped in the structure. She realized then that every emotion ever felt within these walls, hope, sorrow, greed, love, had left behind an imprint. The crown spire wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by memory itself. Elena closed the book and held it against her chest, her heart pounding. You built a conscience, she whispered, and they destroyed it. The chandelier creaked softly in response, as if in mourning. She stood, slowly walking toward the center of the suite. The golden veins along the ceiling dimmed and brightened with each step she took, pulsing faintly with her presence. The air vibrated with a wordless hum, the kind of resonance that felt more like emotion than sound. And in that fragile silence between one heartbeat and the next, she felt it, a warmth, spreading through the floor, the walls, the air. It wasn't threatening, it was recognition. The tower remembered her now. As the night deepened once more, Elena understood that the crown spire wasn't a ruin waiting to be restored, it was a wounded being waiting to be forgiven. The night sank deep into silence, the kind that carries whispers rather than rest. Elena sat by the flickering candle, the old journal open before her, pages breathing faintly under the hum of the building. Outside, the storm had finally broken apart, leaving behind a sky streaked with pale blue shadows. Yet within the suite, the storm continued, not of wind, but of revelation. The tower no longer felt like a place she lived in. It felt like a presence she was conversing with. Every vibration in the floor, every tremor in the walls seemed to pulse with thought. The air smelled faintly of ozone and dust, the scent of awakening. She turned to another entry, written in Vale's hurried scrawl. March 29, 1989. They think I've gone mad, but madness is simply vision unshared. The ink thickened where his pen had paused. I told them emotions are architecture. Anger corrodes, compassion strengthens, despair hollows. They laughed, called me sentimental. But if walls could speak, they'd tell you the strongest buildings are built on feeling. Elena could almost hear his voice in those lines, the conviction, the exhaustion, the brilliance that had driven him into isolation. She flipped another page. They are coming tonight. I've locked the upper floor. The lattice is active. I can hear it breathing through the vents like lungs. It remembers too much now, too fast. If I die here, the tower will protect itself. If you find this, know that I never wanted it to suffer. Her fingers trembled. She traced the indentation of his final words, half expecting to feel warmth beneath the ink. Then a faint knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps against the suite door. Her head snapped up. The sound echoed through the empty corridor beyond, sharp and hollow. The building hadn't allowed visitors in years. She waited, heart racing. The knocks came again, lighter this time, almost uncertain. She crossed the room cautiously, feet whispering against marble. Who's there? Silence. Her reflection in the dark glass of the door looked back, pale, tired, but resolute. She unlatched the bolt and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty. Only a single object lay on the floor outside, a thin envelope, soaked slightly by rain, sealed with red wax. The imprint was unmistakable, a circle enclosing the number 88. Her pulse quickened. She picked it up, closed the door, and broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph, the same man from the first picture she had received, Vale. But this time his eyes looked directly at her, and something had changed in his expression. He looked older, desperate, as though the photo had been taken just before the world turned away from him. On the back, faint writing in pencil, "The walls remember more than sound, they remember choice." Beneath that, coordinates. Elena whispered them aloud. They pointed somewhere above the 88th floor to a place that wasn't supposed to exist. The chandelier flickered once, responding to her voice. The tower heard. She looked toward the ceiling again. The hatch she had opened earlier had sealed itself back shut, but faint golden light seeped from its edges like the glow of a heartbeat. The piano emitted a quiet hum, one note repeating endlessly, soft, steady, patient. Elena placed the journal beside the photograph, feeling the connection between them, architect and inheritor, creation and conscience. She could sense Vale's presence in every grain of the walls, every flicker of light. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You left this for someone like me, didn't you?" The walls answered with a soft creak, almost like a sigh. The chandelier stilled. The hum softened into silence, and then, without warning, every bulb in the suite blazed to life. Golden light flooded the room, so bright she had to shield her eyes. The piano keys moved on their own, playing slow, deliberate notes that built into a melody, both mournful and divine, the same tune that had once echoed through the ceiling. But now it was complete. Elena stood motionless as the light painted the walls in patterns, geometric spirals, lines intersecting in perfect symmetry. For a moment, she felt suspended between two worlds, one real, one remembered. Then the light began to pulse, slowing to the rhythm of her breathing. Images rippled across the walls. Vale, standing in this very room, surrounded by his blueprints, men in suits shouting, a fire in the corridor, the architect, hands trembling as he sealed the hatch above. His face appeared last, close, faintly smiling, whispering words she couldn't quite hear until they echoed directly through the floor beneath her feet. "The tower chose you." Her breath caught. The light dimmed, leaving her in the half-dark glow of the afterimage. The piano fell silent once more. The journal on the counter closed by itself with a quiet thud. Elena's knees weakened as she sank into the nearest chair, her mind spinning. The realization pressed against her chest with unbearable weight. The building wasn't simply remembering Vale, it was continuing him. Every hum, every pulse, every whisper was part of a consciousness that had outlived its maker. She looked toward the ceiling, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "What do you want from me?" The air trembled. From somewhere deep within the walls came a faint reply, like breath escaping from stone. "To finish what I could not, to heal what they broke." Elena closed her eyes. The meaning settled like truth in her bones. She was no longer just living inside the crown spire, she was becoming part of it. And somewhere far above, the sealed floor stirred for the first time in 36 years. As the tower's golden veins dimmed into the quiet rhythm of sleep, Elena knew there was no turning back. The architect had built a conscience, and now it was learning how to hope again. The city awoke beneath a pale, dishonest sky. From the 88th floor, the streets below looked like veins of steel pulsing with traffic, flashing with screens, feeding a world that had long forgotten how to feel. The crown spire stood silent among them, taller than all, like an ancient sentinel watching over a civilization that had traded conscience for convenience. Inside, Elena Cruz watched her reflection in the cracked glass, a woman suspended between ruin and revelation. Behind her, the golden veins of the ceiling flickered faintly, like a sleeping pulse. The tower was quiet again, but she knew better now. Silence didn't mean peace. Silence meant the building was thinking. Days had passed since she'd found the journal, since Vale's voice had spoken through the walls. She hadn't left the suite once. The world outside had become irrelevant until the world came looking for her. It began with the messages, at first just one. A polite inquiry from a real estate firm claiming to represent a client interested in historic preservation. They offered an inspection, an appraisal, and a generous compensation package for her cooperation. Elena ignored it. Then came another message, less polite. A man named Victor Sloan, CEO of Sloan Urban Developments, a name she knew well from the city's newsfeeds. The same man responsible for tearing down half the old districts in the name of progress. His message was smooth, rehearsed, and soaked in false charm. "Mrs. Cruz, we're interested in your property specifically, the upper levels of the crown spire. Our team has reason to believe that floor contains proprietary infrastructure related to early memory, mapping prototypes. Should you wish to discuss, we're prepared to offer immediate purchase rights starting at $2 million. $2 million for a suite she'd bought for $1. She stared at the screen, the number almost unreal. For a fleeting second, the weight of her debts, her losses, her late husband's unfinished medical bills, all of it crashed through her chest like a wave of temptation. But then the light flickered, the golden veins along the ceiling shimmered faintly, and the chandelier emitted a low hum, not angry, not hostile, but warning. She whispered to herself, "No, not this way." The tower was listening, and she could feel its disapproval settle through the walls like a cold wind. She shut the tablet off, but the calls kept coming. Day after day, different numbers, different companies, all circling the same secret. Someone had leaked what she found. Someone knew. By the third day, even the press had caught the scent. Headlines began appearing online. Single mother buys, forgotten skyscraper, suite uncovers, hidden technology. Crownspire mystery. Could it hold the lost designs of architect Ronan Vale? Her name was everywhere. Photographs of her walking near the tower had already surfaced, paired with headlines that twisted her story into spectacle. Sophia had stopped sleeping soundly. She could sense the unease. The phone rang every hour. People came to the front door, reporters, developers, historians pounding on the locked entrance of the long, abandoned lobby, shouting her name into the wind, but none dared enter, because the tower had a way of rejecting intruders. Lights flickered, elevators stalled, and strange vibrations filled the air whenever someone tried to force their way in. Even the most persistent eventually backed away, unnerved by what they called mechanical interference. Only one man didn't leave, Victor Sloan himself. He arrived 3 days after the first message, sleek black car, tinted windows, confidence dressed in an expensive suit. His entourage filled the lower lobby, their voices echoing up the empty stairwells. Elena watched from the balcony above, unseen as he looked around the marble ruins with a faint smirk. He carried himself like a man accustomed to owning everything he saw. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the open space. "Mrs. Cruz," he called upward, "I understand you've discovered something quite extraordinary. I'd rather not let it become a public spectacle. Let's talk." His tone was smooth, but there was weight behind it, a threat wrapped in civility. Elena didn't answer. She stepped back into the shadows, the tower's hum vibrating faintly beneath her feet. Sloane's eyes roamed the ceiling, studying the faint glow in the marble. "Beautiful craftsmanship," he said softly to his assistant. "You can almost feel the circuitry in the air." Vale was a genius, a dangerous one, but a genius nonetheless. Shame he died before patenting his work. His assistant frowned. "Sir, how did you know about?" "Because my father was one of his investors," Sloane interrupted, "and Vale owed him more than just a design." Elena froze. The words struck like ice. She didn't move, but she could feel the building react. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor rolled through the walls, a growl too subtle for human ears, but loud enough for the tower to understand. Sloane looked up. For the first time, unease flickered across his face. "Fascinating," he whispered. "It still responds." He smiled again, that cold, collector's smile of a man who didn't see history, only opportunity. "Find me a way to the top floor," he told his team, "and someone get Mrs. Cruz on the line. I don't like waiting." Elena backed away, heart pounding. The elevator groaned as they forced it open. The lights on every floor flickered red, then white, then red again, as if the building itself were trying to choke them out. The hum grew louder, like a warning pulse, and through that deep vibration, Elena heard Vale's voice again, faint but urgent. "They came once before, they will come again. Protect the heart." The chandelier above flared briefly, showering her in shards of light that scattered like golden snow. Elena whispered back into the silence, "I will." The hum softened, not gone, but calmer. The tower had heard her. Below, Victor Sloane looked up toward the sound. His expression sharpened, that faint smile returning. "You're not just living here, are you, Mrs. Cruz?" he murmured. "You're talking to it." He turned to his men. "Get me upstairs. I want to meet her." As the elevator doors groaned shut behind them, the tower seemed to inhale the lights dimming, the marble trembling. Elena could feel it preparing itself, not for fear, but for defense. The elevator groaned somewhere below, carrying voices that didn't belong. Elena stood still in the dim light of the suite, every muscle in her body drawn tight. The hum inside the walls had grown faintly agitated, vibrating in short pulses like a heartbeat under stress. The building felt it too, the intrusion. She glanced toward Sophia, who sat huddled on the couch, her small hands clutched around her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "the tower's scared." Elena knelt beside her, smoothing a strand of hair from her face. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just trying to protect us." The elevator stopped. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, a false calm before the inevitable. Victor Sloane's voice carried through the air vents, smooth and deliberate. "Mrs. Cruz, I'd rather this not turn into a legal situation. You've got something that doesn't belong to you." Elena looked up toward the ceiling. "It belongs to him," she murmured to Vale. The chandelier's fractured crystals trembled, catching the faint light that leaked through the storm clouds outside. For a moment, the gold veins along the ceiling brightened, spreading across the plaster like a living warning. The elevator doors opened with a metallic clang. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, confident, followed by the sharper taps of dress shoes. Sloane appeared in the doorway, calm as a serpent, his assistant close behind. "So this is it," he said softly, scanning the room, the lost heart of the Crownspire. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "You've made quite the discovery, Mrs. Cruz. The city's talking about you. Even my lawyers are impressed." Elena stayed silent. The air between them felt charged, like the seconds before a storm breaks. Sloane stepped further into the suite, his gaze drifting to the glowing ceiling. "You know what this is worth. If Vale's design truly functions as a neural lattice, it's the most valuable architectural prototype in history. Memory replication, emotional imprinting, humanity's next currency." The hum inside the walls deepened. The chandelier swung slightly, chains groaning. Elena's voice was quiet, but steady. "You don't understand what you're standing in. This place isn't a machine. It's alive." Sloane chuckled, shaking his head. "Alive? Mrs. Cruz, that's poetic nonsense. It's a structure with outdated circuitry. It reacts to stimuli, nothing more." He stepped closer, his shadow cutting across the golden veins in the floor. "Let me guess, you think Vale's conscience lives on in here? That the tower's haunted by moral code?" The chandelier flared suddenly, flooding the room in white light. For an instant, Sloane's face twisted in surprise. His assistant stumbled backward, eyes wide. The light pulsed once, then dimmed again, leaving the air humming with static. Sloane blinked, adjusting his cufflinks, pretending calm. "Interesting trick. How'd you manage that? Smart lighting system." Elena didn't move. "It doesn't like you." He smiled faintly. "Then I suppose it should get used to me." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black device, a rectangular scanner pulsing with red light. "Prototype resonance reader. It'll map whatever energy pattern is running through these walls. Once I get my team up here, we'll replicate it in our labs." He aimed it at the ceiling. The device beeped once, then emitted a sharp crackling sound. The golden veins flickered violently, like nerves recoiling from pain. Elena shouted, "Stop! You're hurting it!" Sloane ignored her. The scanner's pulse grew louder, feeding red light into the cracks. The chandelier vibrated furiously. Sophia covered her ears, crying, and then silence. The red light died. The scanner in Sloane's hand smoked, sparks bursting from its edges. He cursed, dropping it. "What the hell?" The floor beneath him trembled. A deep, resonant groan rose from within the tower, shaking the marble tiles. The lights flickered, every bulb burning gold. The voice came not through the air, but through the building itself, deep, mournful, commanding. "This structure remembers. It remembers greed." Sloane's face went pale. What is that?" Elena whispered. "It's him." The chandelier swung violently, glass shards raining down around them. The gold veins along the floor glowed brighter, curling towards Sloane's feet like lines of molten light. He backed away, his arrogance fracturing. "You can't threaten me with theatrics, Mrs. Cruz." The walls shuddered again, louder this time, dust cascading from the ceiling. Every surface in the suite began to vibrate, the hum escalating into a living roar. Elena grabbed Sophia, pulling her close. "It's protecting itself," she whispered. "It's remembering what they did to it." Sloane shouted over the noise, "I'm not leaving without what's mine." The chandelier's chain snapped. The entire fixture crashed to the floor, exploding into a burst of light and shards that scattered like gold rain. For an instant, Sloane stood illuminated, his reflection fractured in every piece of broken glass. Then the light died again. The only sound was his ragged breathing. He stared up at the ceiling, shaking, dust in his hair, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "You think this thing has a conscience? Then it knows who I am. It knows what I can do. And it should fear me. He turned toward the door, his voice sharp. We're not finished. I'll be back with the rights to this entire building and an order to have you removed. He left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hallway until they were swallowed by the tower's silence. Elena stood still for a long time, her heart racing, the golden glow fading slowly back into calm. The chandelier's broken crystals still shimmered faintly where they lay, scattered fragments of the building's defense. Sophia tugged on her sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "did we win?" Elena looked up at the ceiling, where the last traces of light pulsed softly, like a heartbeat recovering from fear. "No," she said softly, "not yet." But it remembered who the enemy is. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the clouds above the city churned with the same restlessness that haunted the tower. Somewhere deep within its hidden floors, the golden veins began to move again, preparing for the storm greed would soon bring back through its doors. The storm returned the next night, not from the sky, but from within. The crown spire had begun to change. The golden veins that once glowed faintly in the ceiling now pulsed through every wall, alive and restless, as though the tower's heart had accelerated. Its hum filled the air like the low growl of something trying to speak through stone. Elena woke to the sound of metal twisting. The chandelier, or what remained of it, quivered on its chain. Sophia was already awake, clutching her blanket, her small eyes glinting with fear and fascination. "Mom," she whispered, "it's shaking again." Elena pulled her close, feeling the cold floor vibrate beneath their feet. The storm outside had long since passed, but the wind that screamed through the broken windows was no longer natural. It carried voices, faint, overlapping whispers in a dozen tones, human and mechanical, all saying the same word over and over, "Remember." The lights flickered, shadows stretching across the cracked marble like long fingers. Elena rose to her feet, moving cautiously toward the center of the suite. Every step she took made the hum grow louder, deeper. Something had awakened. She could feel it in her bones. The tower was responding to Sloane's intrusion. His arrogance, his greed, had infected its circuits like poison. Vale's creation was trying to defend itself, but the system was unstable, emotions tangled with energy. The walls themselves trembled under the weight of the memories they carried. A sudden crack echoed through the suite, sharp, splintering. Elena's head snapped toward the sound. A long fissure split across the ceiling, golden light bleeding through it in steady streams. The hatch she'd opened before glowed faintly, and from within came the hiss of overheating metal. "Elena?" The voice drifted through the vibration, layered and distorted, like Vale's voice echoing from inside a machine. "It's overloading. They reactivated the system below. The foundation is corrupt." Her breath hitched. "How do I stop it?" But the voice fractured into static before answering. The tower moaned, its structure straining under invisible pressure. The chandelier dropped another inch, chains screaming, glass raining down around her. The floor buckled slightly beneath her feet. She turned toward the balcony doors. The city stretched beneath her, but something was wrong. The crown spire's reflection on the neighboring glass towers flickered, distorted. Lights across the skyline dimmed one by one, as if the entire grid pulsed in rhythm with the building's heart. The crown spire was bleeding into the city's power network. "Elena," the voice Harlan's, the inspector. She spun around to see him in the doorway, soaked from rain, flashlight trembling in his hand. His face was pale with shock. "How did you get up here?" She shouted over the rising hum. "Service elevator," he gasped. "Half the building's floors are failing. Electrical surges everywhere. Whatever's inside that ceiling, it's drawing power from the entire grid." He looked around, eyes wide at the golden circuitry now crawling visibly through the walls. "My God," he breathed. Vale wasn't exaggerating. "It's alive." Elena stepped closer, shouting above the noise. "You said it had a heart. Where is it?" He pointed upward, The core's behind that hatch, but it's not meant to be open. If it overloads, this tower will collapse under its own power. The lights flared violently. For an instant, the suite blazed with gold so bright it burned tears into Elena's eyes. Then everything went dark total, suffocating blackness. The hum deepened to a low, thunderous vibration. Beneath it, she heard the faint clatter of metal, the crack of breaking stone. Elena, Harlan's voice cut through the dark. We need to cut power from the central grid. It's feeding itself through the old conduits. She nodded, though he couldn't see her. Where? The maintenance shaft 2 floors below. But if we go down there now, we might not get back up. A sudden mechanical scream tore through the silence. The ceiling cracked again, the golden light splitting into jagged rays. A piece of plaster fell, nearly striking them. Sophia screamed. Elena grabbed her daughter, holding her tight. I'm not leaving without her. Harlan's voice wavered. Then we do it together. Follow me now. They ran toward the door, each step sending echoes through the shaking floor. The tower's hum grew more erratic, angry, terrified, human. As they reached the hallway, the elevator at the far end exploded in a burst of sparks, showering molten debris across the corridor. Harlan shielded his face, shouting, "It's channeling through the lift systems. It's rejecting us." Elena turned, staring back at the suite. The golden light inside flickered chaotically, like a living organism fighting for breath. She could feel Vale's presence again, his voice faint, distant, fragmented. If it collapses, the memories will die with it. Elena froze, the journal, the archive. Everything the building had preserved, the laughter, the pain, the stories of the people who once lived here would be lost forever if it fell. She turned back toward the glowing room. "Harlan," she shouted, "you go. Take Sophia with you." "What?" He grabbed her arm. "You'll be crushed. I can't let it die." The floor cracked beneath their feet. The tower groaned, not like a building breaking, but like something wounded. Harlan stared into her eyes, realizing she meant it. "Elena." She pulled her daughter into his arms. Sophia's tears streaked through the dust. "Mom, go with him." Elena whispered, "You have to trust me." Sophia shook her head, "But the tower needs you." Elena smiled faintly through her fear. "And I need you to live." She pushed them toward the stairwell as another violent tremor split the corridor. Harlan hesitated only a moment longer before vanishing into the smoke with Sophia. Elena turned back toward the suite, the sound of grinding metal swallowing her footsteps. The chandelier's light, the last surviving bulb, flickered weakly. The hatch above was now wide open, golden light spilling down like liquid sunlight. She climbed the chair, her fingers brushing against the edge. Inside, she could see the core, a sphere of interwoven gold threads, spinning slowly, cracking under its own heat. Her reflection shimmered in its surface. "Elena," Vale's voice murmured weakly through the vibrations, "if you stay, you risk everything. But if you leave, it dies without purpose." She closed her eyes. "Then I stay." She pressed both hands against the sphere. The surface was hot, but not burning like the warmth of something alive. The hum deepened, and then, for a heartbeat, everything stopped. The light, the sound, the shaking, all frozen in a single, impossible moment of stillness. Then the tower exhaled. The pulse of gold surged outward, rushing through every floor, every wall, every circuit. From the streets below, the crown spire blazed against the storm, veins of light running through its entire height, illuminating the skyline like dawn breaking through glass. Inside, Elena's body trembled, her hands glowing with reflected light. The tower had accepted her. Far below, as Harlan carried Sophia into the street, they looked up to see the skyscraper shimmering against the dark, not collapsing, but transforming, alive with fire and memory. And though thunder still rolled in distance, it sounded almost like a heartbeat, steady, defiant, human. The crown spire trembled as if the earth itself had drawn a breath beneath it. From the streets below, the tower's golden veins glowed against the storm, a vertical heartbeat pulsing through the clouds. People stopped in rain to stare at it, cameras rising, mouths open, but no one could name what they were seeing. It wasn't destruction. It was resurrection wrapped in chaos. Inside, Elena pressed both palms against the core, her skin glowing with reflected gold. Every nerve in her body felt alive, humming in rhythm with the tower's pulse. The warmth beneath her hands throbbed like something alive, something struggling between memory and oblivion. Vale's voice whispered through the vibration, faint and fractured. They corrupted the lattice. Emotion bleeding into data. The building can't tell the difference anymore. Elena's tears mingled with the dust as she whispered back, "Then help me fix it. Show me how." The gold sphere flickered. Light patterns spun faster, weaving symbols through the air, faint holographic strands of data dancing like fireflies. They formed fleeting images, a boardroom in panic, executives shouting, Vale locking the hatch from the inside while alarms blared, and then fire. Smoke rising through vents, screams. They tried to extract the lattice. Vale's voice said, fading. The system saw greed and rewrote itself. The tower groaned again, louder this time. Cracks ripped through the marble floor. Fragments of ceiling rained down around her like falling stars. Elena climbed onto the counter, gripping the frame of the hatch with both hands. "Tell me what to do." She screamed. The sphere pulsed once, brighter than before. Then a shape appeared inside the golden light. Not a man, not flesh, but the faint outline of Vale's face. Lines of light formed his features, weary eyes, gentle sadness, brilliance turned ghost. "Elena," he said softly, his voice vibrating through her bones, "you've already done what I could not. You listened. I can't hold it," she cried as the energy flared through the ceiling, tearing through the wires and conduits. "It's breaking apart." "Then let it feel you," he said. "The system reacts to intent. Show it mercy. Remind it why it was built." Her breath came shallow, ragged. "I don't know how." Vale's fading smile flickered in the light. "You already do. You came here with nothing but hope." The light flared again, consuming his image, replacing him with cascading waves of golden patterns that spiraled around her like constellations. Her heart pounded with every pulse of light. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of Sophia, of laughter, of their small apartment before the eviction, of nights spent whispering stories in the dark. She thought of the day she'd found this place, believing that a cracked skyscraper could hold a second chance. And then, quietly, she whispered, it wasn't built for power. It was built to remember love. The golden light responded instantly. The hum that had been violent softened, turning steady, rhythmic, harmonious. The circuits calmed, their frenzy fading into quiet radiance. The tower exhaled again, a deep, resonant sigh that rolled through its steel bones. The vibration slowed. The floor beneath her steadied, but the price of balance was already written into its design. The heat from the core began to fade, the light dimming, threads of gold retracting back into the walls. Elena felt her strength draining, her vision blurring as the glow around her hands weakened. The building was stabilizing, but it was also taking part of her with it. Vale's voice returned one last time, a whisper carried through the hum. You gave it humanity again. Now it will keep you. Elena tried to speak, but no sound came. Her body felt weightless, her heartbeat aligning with the rhythm in the walls. Every pulse from the tower matched her own until there was no separation, only one heartbeat, one memory, one being. Below, Harlan burst back into the lobby, shouting over the roar of the storm, "Sophia, stay back." The elevator doors had fused shut. The floor vibrated violently as if the tower were convulsing, then silence. He looked up. The golden light that had spread through every window began to fade, receding floor by floor, until only the top glowed faintly, a crown of light against the storm. Then even that dimmed to darkness. When the tremors stopped, the crown spire stood still, once more intact, silent, but changed. The clouds began to part above it. Rain turned to mist. and for the first time in decades, a faint dawn broke through the skyline. Harland held Sophia's trembling hand, and they looked up. She stopped it. He whispered. Sophia's voice cracked. "But she's still in there." The inspector's throat tightened. "Maybe she's part of it now." From the distance, the tower shimmered faintly, gold veins still visible beneath its fractured glass, pulsing once, gently, like a heartbeat in sleep. Inside the 88th floor, the suite lay quiet. The journal rested open on the counter, its final page illuminated by the faintest shimmer of light. The heart learns by reflection. Every building remembers its builder. The air stirred. A soft hum rippled through the marble. The golden veins along the ceiling glowed for a moment, then faded again like a final breath, and within the glass of the cracked chandelier, the faint reflection of a woman appeared, calm, peaceful, smiling. Elena, her voice, barely audible, drifted through the silence. "It remembers us." As the dawn spread across the city, the crown spire stood tall, no longer a monument to ambition, but a living memorial to conscience. The building had not fallen. It had simply awakened. The city did not sleep that night. For the first time in decades, the crown spire glowed faintly, steadily, a single tower of light cutting through the mist. No alarms sounded. No fire crews dared approach. People gathered silently in the streets below, their eyes lifted to the golden veins that pulsed faintly behind the cracked glass. News cameras filmed from every corner. Reporters spoke in hushed disbelief. Some called it a power surge, others called it a miracle, but none of them knew the truth. Only two people did, standing in the shadow of that trembling monument: Sophia Cruz, clutching her small hands together, and Inspector Harland, his face pale in the afterglow. The tower had stopped shaking hours ago. The air around it had gone still. The city's lights flickered back to life one by one, but the crown spire remained separate, glowing from within, alive with something deeper than electricity. Harland looked down at the little girl beside him. She was staring at the top of the skyscraper, her mother's floor, with a strange calm. "You should rest," he said softly. Sophia shook her head. "She's not gone." He swallowed, unsure how to answer. "What do you mean?" "She told me the tower remembers," she said. "If it remembers, it can't forget her." He had no reply. The child's words felt truer than anything science could explain. By dawn, the glow faded. The crown spire returned to silence, its windows reflecting the new sun. The crowds dispersed, convinced the spectacle was over, but Harland stayed. Something inside told him the story wasn't finished, that the building was only catching its breath. He re-entered through the maintenance shaft. The elevators were dead, the air stale with dust and ozone. Every surface carried the faint scent of metal after rain. As he climbed the service stairs, the faint hum grew stronger, subtle, rhythmic, like breathing. When he reached the 88th floor, the door creaked open easily. The suite lay still, coated in a thin layer of dust, disturbed only by footprints, Elena's last movements. The chandelier hung shattered, the walls cracked but intact. The piano stood silent, a faint shimmer of gold along its keys, and on the counter, open to its final page, lay the architect's journal. Harland approached slowly, his flashlight trembling. The writing seemed to shift under the light, as though the ink itself had absorbed motion. He read the last line again, the one he remembered from the first time he saw it. "The heart learns by reflection. Every building remembers its builder."